Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a drone begins stalking a sunbathing woman on a remote Texas ranch, her husband, a raptor trainer with hawks sharper than his wit, decides to fight back. But this isn't just a privacy issue, it's war. And in Elijah Cole's sky, predators don't ask permission, they strike. My name is Elijah Cole, and I've built a life most people would call eccentric, maybe even a little wild. But it's mine, and I like it that way. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a wildlife control specialist. No, not the pest guy with the raccoon traps. I train raptors, falcons, hawks, even a couple of owls for aerial pest deterrence. Airports, vineyards, cattle farms, solar farms, anywhere birds or rodents threaten infrastructure or agriculture, I'm the guy they call. Some people have dogs. I've got winged apex predators with 1,000-yard stares and claws that can slice through Kevlar. I live on a 120-acre ranch in the dry, open stretches of central Texas. It's the kind of land that doesn't just give you peace, it swallows sound whole. No HOAs, no sidewalks, no manicured lawns, just hills, scrub, fence posts, and sky. And that suits me perfectly. I built the main house myself. Solid cedar, metal roof, wraparound porch, reinforced aviary right out back. It's not fancy, but it breathes freedom. My wife, Julia, lives here with me, and to say she's my anchor would be underselling it. She's the only person who can watch a 6-pound falcon tear apart a training lure midair and then ask what's for lunch in the same breath. Right now, our family includes 2 eagles, Logan and King, who patrol the far ridge and only land when they're bored or it's feeding time. Then there are the falcons, small, fast, precise. And finally, Titan. Titan is a Harris's hawk with a temper that could make a prison guard blink. He's sharp, obedient, and has an unnatural hatred for anything that hums and hovers. If it beeps, flashes, or buzzes, Titan sees it as a personal challenge. Life out here used to be quiet. Most mornings, I'd sit on the porch with coffee in one hand and a leather glove on the other, Titan perched and ready. We'd watch the sun climb, sometimes take a flight across the canyon for drills, sometimes just enjoy the stillness. Julia often sunbathes out back by the pool, our own little slice of paradise, fenced in, shaded by mesquites, and invisible to anyone who doesn't belong here. That's what made what happened next so strange. Julia doesn't spook easy. She's lived with raptors long enough to know calm and alert. But one morning, she came inside, towel around her waist and eyebrows drawn together. "I think someone's watching me," she said flatly. I laughed. "Well, that's flattering." "I'm serious," she said. "There's been this drone. 3 days now. Same time every morning. It just hovers. Too low to be a fluke." I stopped mid-sip and looked out of the window. Out here, we don't get accidental flyovers. Not without a reason. Not without someone trying to get a real good look at something. And that was the moment I knew someone was about to find out what happens when you invade the airspace of a man who trains hunters for a living. I didn't say anything right away, but that night, I pulled the memory card from our backyard camera system and went through the last few days. Sure enough, right there at 9:04 a.m., like clockwork, a drone floated silently into frame, sleek, commercial grade, with an underbelly camera and stabilizers that screamed, "Not some kid's toy." It hovered just above the back fence, then crept forward until it was directly over our terrace where Julia usually laid out. Then it did something that made my stomach turn. It tilted downward, zoomed in, lingered. I watched it loop around, dip low again, and then take off toward the northeast, over the ridge and out of sight. Next day, same thing. Same pattern, same time. It wasn't some hobbyist getting lost. It wasn't surveying or weather study. This was deliberate, repetitive, creepy. I'm a patient man by trade. You don't work with birds of prey without learning the value of stillness. But I also know a predator's pattern when I see one. This drone was circling, scanning, timing. I got to work. I had a directional antenna I sometimes used for field tracking. It wasn't meant for drones, but with a little calibration, it could trace the control signal's source. The next morning, I waited. Julia stayed inside. Sure enough, 9:03 a.m., that whiny buzz returned, and the drone came gliding in like it owned the sky. I activated the antenna, locked the signal, and watched the readout on my laptop map a return path. The origin point? 2 miles northeast, right smack in the middle of a planned residential community called Cypress Ridge, a place notorious for its pristine sidewalks, pastel vinyl siding, and, most importantly, a notoriously overreaching HOA. And that's when it clicked: Karen Mansfield. We'd crossed paths before. She was the kind of woman who said things like, "I just care about community standards," while judging your entire soul by your driveway gravel. A few months back, she sent a certified letter, certified, complaining that our hawks posed an existential threat to HOA pets and small children, and that Julia's sunbathing could be viewed as inappropriate given the neighborhood's moral values. I'd ignored her then. Mistake number one. I found her name again in the FAA drone registry. That sleek sky stalker registered to none other than Karen J. Mansfield. You'd think someone using a drone for peeping would at least have the sense to not link it to their real name, but Karen was never one to believe consequences applied to her. I gave her a call. I wasn't angry, yet. Just tired, and I've found that quiet men scare people more than yelling ever does. She answered on the second ring. Karen speaking. Hi Karen, Elijah Cole here. Quick question. Are you flying a drone over my property? Pause. Excuse me? Every morning, same drone, registered to your name, hovering over my wife. It's not subtle. Another pause, this one colder. I am conducting visual oversight on behalf of the Cypress Ridge HOA. There have been complaints about indecent exposure visible from public trails. Public trails? I laughed once. Karen, our nearest trail is 1.5 miles out, surrounded by forest and private fences. Unless your HOA members are trespassing with binoculars, nobody sees anything. I don't appreciate your tone, she snapped. The HOA reserves the right to document behavior that affects the collective welfare of the surrounding community. You mean spy? With a camera drone. On my wife. I mean monitor. I breathed in through my nose. Karen, I said evenly, you're not just out of line, you're over the fence and sprinting into lawsuit territory. That drone flies over my property again, just once, and I'll let nature take its course. And I promise you, Karen, you don't want nature to be the one settling this. She hung up without another word, but I wasn't finished. Because if Karen thought this was about moral superiority, she was about to learn what happens when you try to play watchdog in a sky that doesn't belong to you. The morning after that call, I didn't sleep in. I was up before the sun, coffee in hand, boots laced, leather gauntlets strapped tight to my forearm. Titan knew something was coming. He could feel it. He was already shifting his weight, feathers puffed in anticipation. That bird doesn't wait for permission, he waits for purpose. Julia stayed inside this time. She didn't need to be a target, not today, but she stood by the window, arms crossed, watching. I knew she wanted justice as badly as I did, not just because someone had violated her privacy, but because she hated bullies, always had. I perched Titan on the elevated rail that overlooks our back lawn. His eyes scanned the horizon like radar. He didn't know what he was looking for yet, but instinct had him dialed in. At 9:02 a.m., we heard it. That high-pitched hum rising over the treetops like a taunt. I didn't move, just reached into the pouch at my hip and unclipped the leather leash from Titan's jesses. He shifted once, head snapping toward the drone as it emerged from the canopy. Same model, same flight path. This time, it was cockier. It hovered higher, steadier, as if daring us to act. The drone descended over the backyard, aiming directly over the pool. That camera gimbal spun slowly, searching, probably looking for Julia's outline. I raised my hand just slightly. Go. Titan launched with a scream that split the morning air in two. His wings caught the breeze like a sail unfurling in a storm. I could hear the shift in air pressure as he rose, faster than the drone operator could have ever predicted. Raptors don't chase, they strike. The drone tried to climb, fast, but Titan was already in range. One powerful beat of his wings, talons flared, and with a cracks that echoed across the hills, he struck. Plastic shattered, rotors crumpled mid-spin. The drone spun wildly, vomiting sparks, and crashed into a patch of dry brush near the back fence, twitching like a bug sprayed with poison. Titan circled once, then landed 10 feet from the wreckage, chest heaving like a boxer after a knockout. He looked back at me, then at the crushed drone, then back again. Job well done. Julia slid open the glass door behind me. Was that it? Yup. She stepped out barefoot, arms folded. Did he really just... She trailed off, eyeing the wreckage. Oh, yeah, I said, sipping from my mug. Pitched a no-hitter. She grinned. Should we call the FAA? I nodded slowly. We will. But first, I'm going to mail the remains back to Karen, express shipping, maybe with a bow. Julia snorted, then leaned into my side. You know, she said, sometimes I forget how terrifying you actually are. I smirked and looked toward Titan, still standing watch like some ancient sentinel. Not me, I said. Him. I had barely finished my second cup of coffee when the war drums started beating. At first it was quiet, a strongly worded email from Karen, full of phrases like destruction of personal property, unprovoked aggression, and hostile bird activity. She demanded I either restrain my weaponized wildlife or face legal action. I read it aloud to Julia while she was cutting lemons in the kitchen. She nearly sliced one in half, mid-air laughing. But by noon, things had escalated. 3 members of the Cypress Ridge HOA showed up at my gate, flanked by a man in an ill-fitting blazer clutching a clipboard and a community compliance consultant badge swinging from his neck. They stood there like they were about to condemn a city building. Karen wasn't with them, but her perfume lingered in the air somehow, like lavender mixed with litigation. The man with the badge cleared his throat and began reading from a prepared statement. Mr. Cole, pursuant to Community Code Article 9.3b and the Shared Perimeter Visual Integrity Clause, your property has been identified as a source of multiple compliance violations. I just stared, then said, that was a lot of syllables for something that means absolutely nothing. He continued, unfazed. You are harboring unregistered aerial fauna, which has now been involved in the destruction of privately owned surveillance equipment. I raised a brow. Surveillance? You mean that peeping drone? No, he said seriously. A monitoring tool. Right, monitoring the curvature of my wife's back, apparently. They tried to hand me a citation. I didn't take it. Gentlemen, I said, stepping just far enough past the gate for Titan, now perched behind me on a high pole to be visible. You're standing on the edge of private land, 2 miles outside of your HOA's jurisdiction. Unless you've got a court order or wings, I suggest you turn around. They did. Not immediately, but with enough hesitation to suggest they'd be back. With worse. And they were. The next morning, another drone showed up. This one was newer, faster, built for high altitude and long-range recon, but I had upgraded too. I mounted 2 portable signal jammers, legal in rural counties for nuisance protection, and scrambled its GPS mid-hover. It began to wobble like a drunk bee, then spiraled into a mesquite tree with a loud whap. I left it there like a warning. 2 days later, I received an official HOA violation summary. It was 27 pages long and looked like something cooked up in a middle school model UN. It accused me of violating a community overlook ordinance, which, after some digging, I discovered wasn't even a real statute, just something Karen had typed up and backdated to look official. But here's the kicker. The final page included a fine of $4,800 for failure to comply with regional sky-sharing ethics. Sky-sharing ethics. That's when I knew they'd lost their minds. I forwarded the entire packet to my lawyer, who replied with, "Please tell me this is a joke." It wasn't. Not to Karen. She even had the gall to send a formal request to the county zoning board, petitioning to classify my ranch as a high-risk open aerial liability zone. She attached photos of Titan mid-flight, red-circled like some kind of airborne felon, and a ridiculous claim that my birds could interfere with neighborly leisure, satellite reception, and community vibrational harmony. Vibrational harmony. I was starting to wonder if she'd been sniffing her HOA bylaws for too long. I knew it wouldn't stop with drones. Karen didn't lose gracefully. She lost like a villain in a low-budget courtroom drama, clutching pearls and screaming about justice. But I wasn't about to play her game. I was going to take her to court. By the end of the week, it was no longer about a drone. It wasn't even about privacy. It had become a full-on assault on my right to exist outside the reach of their perfect pastel fences and self-congratulatory newsletters. Karen had taken it personally. How dare someone resist her polished tyranny? So I took the fight somewhere she couldn't bend the rules. Court. My attorney, Melinda Ortiz, was a seasoned civil litigator with the eyes of a hawk and the patience of a saint. When I showed her the drone footage, the forged violation notices, and the laughable sky-sharing ethics doctrine, she just leaned back, smiled, and said, "Let's teach Karen what airspace really means." We filed a multi-count civil suit in Travis County District Court. Charges included invasion of privacy, unlawful surveillance, harassment, libel, and attempted enforcement of fraudulent HOA authority on a non-member property. We also submitted a demand for $250,000 in damages, covering emotional distress, reputational harm, thank you, HOA leaflets, and expenses related to legal defense and property security upgrades. It didn't take long for the summons to hit Karen's designer mailbox. Her response? Doubling down. Her lawyers filed a counterclaim, alleging reckless endangerment via aggressive animal deployment and intentional destruction of private property with trained wildlife. They included stills of Titan mid-flight as exhibits of aggression, alongside the mangled remains of the drones, which, I'll admit, did look a bit post-apocalyptic. The courtroom was packed the day we opened. Local media caught wind, and apparently, the idea of a bird versus drone war had enough novelty to trend. Even the bailiff smirked as he read the case title under his breath. Karen walked in wearing pearls, white blazer, lips pursed like she was about to audition for a courtroom reality show. Her lawyer, young, expensive, probably got hired because his suit was shinier than his sense. Melinda handled the opening statement with a surgeon's grace. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a neighborly dispute, but a clear, sustained campaign of harassment. Ms. Mansfield used surveillance-grade drones to observe Mr. Cole's private property, targeting his wife's personal activities. Not only is this an egregious invasion of privacy, it is also a violation of FAA guidelines in Texas Penal Code Section 21.15. And when confronted, rather than cease, Ms. Mansfield escalated her behavior with threats, forged violations, and defamatory materials distributed to neighboring residents." Karen's attorney tried to argue public interest. The HOA was simply ensuring that moral standards were being upheld, he said, ignoring the groan from someone in the back row. Melinda raised an eyebrow. By using unmanned aerial vehicles to record a woman sunbathing, at what point does community concern cross into voyeurism? We presented the drone flight logs, GPS data, the high-resolution camera footage showing the exact moment Titan intercepted and neutralized the first drone. Testimony from Julia, calm but firm, describing how it felt to be watched by something silent and hovering. Then came the HOA documents, highlighted, red-penned, dates altered, rules invented. It was like watching someone throw gasoline on their own credibility and strike a match. Karen tried to testify. Big mistake. She claimed the drone was automated and misprogrammed, then said it was part of an HOA wildlife survey, then changed it to a misunderstood community outreach tool. The judge interrupted. "Ms. Mansfield, was it your drone?" "Yes." "Did it fly over Mr. Cole's property?" "Yes, but did you attempt to justify that by inventing non-existent ordinances?" Silence. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. By the third day, it was over. The judge didn't even need a full deliberation. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Elijah Cole, on all counts. The defendant, Ms. Karen Mansfield, is ordered to pay $250,000 in damages. Further, the court recommends the matter be forwarded for investigation into civil misconduct by the Cypress Ridge HOA. The gavel fell. Karen's face drained of color. As reporters crowded me outside the courthouse, one of them asked, "Mr. Cole, any comment?" I looked at the camera. Titan sat on my leather glove, feathers pristine, gaze fixed straight ahead. "Sometimes," I said, "you don't need lawyers or threats. You just need the right bird." There's a unique kind of silence that follows a victory in court, a silence that doesn't hum with tension, but settles like a warm blanket. It's the quiet of truth, finally standing taller than the noise. After the gavel struck and the judge rendered her decision, I didn't feel elated. I felt relieved, tired, like I'd finally put down a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Karen Mansfield didn't look at me as we left the courtroom. Her head was high, but her eyes were hollow, like someone who'd finally reached the end of a bluff. Her lawyer avoided eye contact entirely. I heard later that she tried to appeal the ruling. The appellate court dismissed it in a single session. There wasn't a loophole she could slither through. Not this time. The court didn't just fine her personally. The HOA itself came under fire. After evidence showed that several board members had allowed Karen to operate without oversight, or worse, had silently supported her absurd initiatives, the county commission ordered an external audit of the Cypress Ridge HOA. The results were brutal. 4 board members resigned within a week. 2 were cited for negligence in governance. HOA funds had been used to print false citations, pay for drone repairs, and even fund Karen's community surveillance initiative, which included purchases like night vision goggles and 2 additional drones, both thankfully unused. The remaining members scrambled to issue public apologies. Then came the real kicker. The HOA insurance provider dropped them, labeled them a legal liability. Suddenly, the proudest neighborhood in the region had no coverage and no leadership. Homeowners began holding emergency meetings, not to save face, but to start over. A new board was elected. Quiet folks, humble, most of them openly embarrassed by what had happened. Karen, meanwhile, became persona non grata. The very residents she once tried to protect began turning away when she passed by. Her Facebook groups were deleted. Her lawn, once an immaculate geometric pattern of HOA-approved perfection, grew wild and patchy. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. A month after the trial, I received the full settlement, $250,000 deposited directly. After legal fees, I had enough left to cover new fencing, additional surveillance, and a dedicated rehab facility on the ranch for injured wildlife. I named it the Titan Reserve. Fitting, I thought. He'd earned more than just applause. Julia, for her part, got her peace back. She now sunbathes with a Bluetooth speaker, playing jazz and Titan perch just out of reach, watching the horizon like a soldier on post. She smiles more. Her shoulders are looser. No more shadows overhead. Neighbors from miles around began reaching out, some of them from other neighborhoods. Apparently, word of our case had spread across more than one HOA's jurisdiction. I started getting invitations to community talks, landowner forums, even schools. People wanted to hear about Titan, sure, but more than that, they wanted to understand how someone could push back, how to say no to a system that steamrolls people in the name of standards. One afternoon, a retired couple from Cypress Ridge came out to visit. They'd voted for Karen once. They brought a homemade pecan pie and a small card that simply read, "Thank you for reminding us what real ownership means." I thanked them not for the pie, but for the honesty. We sat on the porch. Titan watched from his perch, calm and still. The land felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I'd reclaimed it in every way that mattered. The fence didn't just keep people out. It reminded me that boundaries weren't fences at all. They were lines of respect. And when someone crosses them, you have 2 choices. Let them keep going or stand your ground. I chose the latter, with talons. About 6 weeks after the trial, I woke up to something strange. Laughter. Not the usual kind you get from a couple walking their dog or kids daring each other to touch the electric fence. No, this was bigger, joyful, chaotic. It drifted over the hills in waves, bouncing off the trees like music. I stepped out onto the porch, still in my flannel pajama pants and undershirt, coffee in hand, and there it was. A parade. No, seriously, a parade. Parked along the gravel road leading to my ranch were maybe 24 vehicles, all lined up like someone had decided my property needed its own Mardi Gras. Balloons floated lazily in the Texas sun. A handmade sign strung between 2 poles read, "First Annual Titan Day. Justice flies on wings." I blinked. Once, twice. At the head of the gathering stood Dale, one of the new HOA board members from Cypress Ridge, dressed in a full bird costume, feathers, beak and all, holding a clipboard and a loudspeaker. "Elijah," he shouted as I stepped down from the porch. "Hope you don't mind. We thought we'd celebrate." Behind him, kids wore paper hawk masks. Someone had built a fake drone out of cardboard and set up a mini catapult. Every time it launched, a kid with foam talons jumped off a hay bale and tackled it mid-air. The crowd roared every time a hit was clean. Julia walked out beside me, sunglasses on, already shaking her head. "You knew about this?" I asked. She shrugged with a smirk. I might have approved a flyer. "They made shirts," I said, noticing someone walking by in a t-shirt that read, "Karen flew too close to the hawk." There was even a mock Court of the Birds. A little stage with hay bales for seats and a podium where a girl no older than 10, dressed in a feathered cape and judge's wig, slammed a wooden spoon like a gavel. "We hereby sentence the drone to permanent grounding," she yelled. Someone dressed as a drone screamed and flopped dramatically into the grass. Parents cheered. One guy threw birdseed into the air like confetti. I lost it. Laughed so hard I had to put my coffee down. They weren't mocking Karen. They were celebrating the idea that someone could win. That a lone landowner with a hawk and a boundary could say no. That privacy still meant something. That dignity could be defended, even with feathers. I walked through the crowd, shook hands, took photos with Titan, who behaved like a professional, posing stoically on his perch as if fully aware of his celebrity status. At one point, a man approached me, older, quiet, wearing a hat that said veteran and eyes that had seen their share of fights. "Son," he said, extending a hand, "you stood your ground." "Not enough men do that anymore." "Didn't have much choice," I said. He grinned. "Oh, there's always a choice. You just picked the right one." As the sun dipped low and the homemade parade turned into a barbecue, I found myself thinking about the absurdity of it all. A drone, a bird, a stubborn HOA president who thought the sky belonged to her. And yet, here we were, hosting what had to be the first justice-themed ranch carnival in Texas history. Later that evening, I hammered a new sign onto the front gate. Big, bold, carved into mesquite wood. "Protected by talons. Drones will be eaten. Karens will be judged." I stood back, admired it, then turned to Titan perched silently beside me. "Think we'll get peace now?" I asked. He blinked once, slow and calm. That was enough for me. And with that, the sky was ours again.